I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Tom Ellis, star and executive producer on the blockbuster fantasy drama Lucifer, playing the devil himself. Tom, there has always been this mystique about characters that we perceive, at least initially, as morally ambiguous. Like it's almost aspirational for us to want to also be as unapologetically subversive and provocative as someone like Lucifer. So do you agree that that was one of the real selling points for you wanting to play a character like him?
Yeah, I mean, I think most actors would say it's always more fun to play a baddie. And I think if you look at like what does that mean? I think it's almost like cathartic in a way as an actor to be able to kind of play a character that says everything that you probably would want to say in real life but can't get away with saying. And so there's a huge kind of release in playing something like that. And it's often, it's often tinged with humor, which is something that I really gravitate towards. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot more fun than playing someone who's incredibly straight-laced and very conservative, put it that way.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy the humor on the show. You know, this series and the season finale, I was going to say series, but we have one more season to go. The season finale had you guys doing that can't touch this dance in the stadium standoff with
Yeah.
Michael. I like that irreverence. Has that been a conscious effort to make the show more irreverent as the season progressed? Just, I guess, because we're all so miserable in our pandemic lives that it's been so great to watch the show.
Yeah, I think we've always kind of experimented with the boundaries of what we can get away with on Lucifer. I mean, one of the things that I think has been a huge friend for us is the humor in the show, and it's meant that we can push the boundaries of what we can get away with because the show has this kind of self-knowing quality. We know we're being ridiculous. We know we're not trying to portray some kind of like earnest thing all the time. Yet, I think when you strip away all the humor and the silliness in those moments, what people are surprised about with Lucifer is that they really care about the characters. So even though we're doing these ridiculous skits from time to time, and at the beginning of this angel battle, Lucifer's delaying tactic is to break into MC Hammer and hope that everyone else joins in. It's like I remember reading it on the day, going, "God, is this too much?" Because it's like a really, we've really earned this moment of gravity of these two brothers facing off with each other. Are we going too far? But every time I've had that moment, I was always encouraged by Joe or Ildy to just go for it and then just and see what happens. And of course, we go for it and it feels right. And it's one of those moments that people go, "Oh my God, I love that moment," because we've kind of earned it. And then obviously what comes straight after that moment in Lucifer is you find yourself laughing hilariously at something silly like that. And then, 5 minutes later, Chloe's being stabbed to death. So
Yeah.
it's you've got to kind of pick your moments. But it's been our friend because it stopped our show being a very sort of turgid, earnest show about big celestial characters, and it's actually been a kind of jovial story with a heart to it, basically.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of shows like that, that really earnest story about celestial beings and the devil and whatever, and they're fine. But this show stands apart because of its tone and obviously because of the production value performances. But there's something actually about what you do as Lucifer that I really wanted to bring up with you because I'd love to hear what you think. So he's the devil, right? He's supposed to be bad, or at least play to our less ethical instincts. And yet I feel a real connection with him. Like for some reason I get him. And I think that has a lot to do with, even though it can be quite a funny show, you have this sincerity with what you're doing with this character that elicits a sense of belief in what he believes in. So can you talk us through what you're trying to do there?
Yeah, I mean, I think any character, especially when we're talking about what you're talking about in the first instance, people playing these kind of characters that are morally ambiguous, that would be perceived as bad characters. For me, as the actor playing that, I have to find something that I feel sorry for about that character, or can like at least sympathize or empathize with on some level, to gain some understanding of why they're doing the things they're doing, or why they've become the person they've become. And with Lucifer, I to start with, I try to not think about all the devil side of things and just think of him as a character in any other way I'd think about a character. And so thinking about his issues with his dad, thinking about someone who feels like they've been wronged and has a huge chip on their shoulder, someone who maybe hasn't matured that much. I always thought of Lucifer as a teenager when we first started out. And you know, I knew that like, if we had any longevity to this series, that it's someone who was going to evolve as a person, be on a very much be on a journey, because I always thought this show was a journey about redemption, like the ultimate redemption story, the most irredeemable of characters perceived by humans over history. You know, on a is like anyone is allowed a shot at redemption, and why isn't that a good story to tell? So I tried to ground it in those sort of things and try and make it something that I can relate to as Tom with the character, and then hopefully our audience will find something relatable within that as well. And I think that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise we can't relate to, I mean, we don't have to always relate to characters, but it certainly helps to empathize with them and feel a connection with what they're doing. You've played Lucifer now for a few seasons over years. So when you get back into playing him season after season, do you know him so well that you just slip into his shoes with ease, or are you still discovering new intricacies and complexities about him?
I think the actual technical playing of Lucifer is something that just feels very, very like just stepping into a pair of shoes these days. I think the thing that's changed and that surprises me sometimes about him is his ability to process and his ability to understand what's happening to him and around him, and his emotional development. Those are the things that I'm like, this is new for Lucifer. But yeah, no, I mean, once I'd kind of etched out who that character was going to be when we were doing the pilot, it became more and more like putting on a costume every day, and you just slip straight into it. The sort of the I was going to say like acting experiment or something that really brought that home to me was last season when I was playing Lucifer and Michael at the same time, and I felt very different playing Michael. I felt very, very uncomfortable playing Michael at times because it wasn't. I didn't have that kind of ease. I didn't know who this character was as well. I didn't feel as a performer so comfortable in that physicality, and certainly I felt the comfort of being around the people that I've been around for 5 years, playing this one character. When I was suddenly rocking up and trying to play a new character, I, as a performer in my head from time to time, felt really like I was a bit of a fraud, and there was a lot of self-doubt that crept in. But I tried to sort of use that to my advantage as well with the character of Michael.
Yeah, I mean, obviously playing these two characters, they're so different. I noticed immediately, well, it actually emphasized for me, it's similar question to what I asked before, but Lucifer's brash and confident and cunning and charismatic, but there's a lot of vulnerability there and sensitivity in your portrayal of him. And they're traits that we don't often see with the leading man on a TV series, the anti-hero. So in this day and age, given like when we see Michael, it's such another side and a much less nuanced kind of guy. Do you ever give much thought to defining and exploring this version of masculinity exhibited by Lucifer and how it's different to a lot of other shows we've seen?
There's certainly, I mean, there was a freedom about Lucifer that I loved. We very much sort of said that this guy is a bisexual kind of representation of basic fluidity amongst human gender, because he doesn't process the world that way. He is just someone who loves humanity and loves the notion of sex and all of those things. So there was a freedom to that, and he wasn't also a character that was etched out compared to the rest of masculinity in the human society. So there was an opportunity there to play someone who was very much kind of like an alpha character, but with a lot more shades of grey to it, basically. But yeah, you're right. I mean, more often than not, the kind of the alpha male characters that we know that lead the shows over time and in Hollywood have not had that about them. And I wonder moving forward whether, as the world progresses and conversations become, more open and people become more open and talk about things they didn't used to talk about, I wonder whether our male characters on screen are going to evolve and develop in the same way.
Yeah, let's hope so. So you're also a producer on the show. What does that involve? How does that affect your ability to have more influence on the show's direction?
It kind of happened organically, my producing on the show. I mean, when we first started out, I was just leading the show as the actor, but the way that which Lucifer worked was we would have I would play around with the script quite a lot. and what was on the page. And I had a lot of license to do that unofficially from our showrunners. And then of course things like music and stuff started to become the fabric of the show as well. And that's really a strong point for me. And you know, I bringing things like composition and arrangements to some of the musical things that we're doing, and just in being, you know, influential in terms of tone and stuff like that, because it's very difficult when you've got your writer's room, you know, for the first 2 seasons, they were down in LA and we were up in Vancouver. So having some kind of continuity of tone and just keeping an eye on everything that's been going on, I very much became that sort of point of contact. And it just evolved that way, basically, my producing on the show. But eventually it became like an official title and made me feel like I was able to say the things I wanted to say, but felt like maybe it wasn't my place to say it. And I
Yeah,
just,
right.
like, the gloves were off basically when I became the producer,
Well,
but
that's really,
in
yeah.
a good way, because we're all, you know, that's the thing at Lucifer. It's always been like best idea wins. There's not a big ego there in terms of like, no, I wrote this, so this is how it has to be. Everyone always wants the best version of what we can get out there. And we've always had a very collective creative input in terms of that.
I wonder with someone like yourself, now that you have that extra role, which is more formalized, when you go move on to other projects and series and films, whether you'll feel like you need to have that element as well. Do you think it'll be the case, or you'll just kind of let go and start again?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think there might be two versions of that. I mean, I'm about to go and do a movie in a month's time that I have no kind of like producerial control over, and I'm just going very much as an actor to be on that. And it's going to be interesting because that's my first job since Lucifer. So I don't know how my head is going to be programmed in terms of, you know, wanting to sort of butt in and give a piece of my mind about it. But I think that's naturally in me anyway. As someone, I've always been someone who's like always making suggestions, whatever kind of creative space I'm in. Hopefully, people don't find it that annoying. But I felt like I earned my stripes at least on Lucifer with that one. But I
Yeah.
think moving forward, I very much want to be involved in projects that I'm doing from the ground up. Like, you know, from if they're adaptations of books or anything like that. I really want to sort of start from the grassroots of a project and be involved in bringing people into it, because I did learn on Lucifer a lot behind the camera, but I also learned about myself that I really like bringing people together creatively.
Yeah, yeah, that must be super rewarding. We do have to talk about, you know, the Lucifer's the series' journey from broadcast TV to Netflix, because I know everyone wants to raise it, but it is such an interesting story. It's happened on a few other series. I can just think off the top of my head, like Cobra Kai, where you're kind of off Broadway on a network or something, and then you get cancelled, and then Netflix picks it up because they know what they're doing, and bang, you become a huge global hit. What was it like back at that time when you were cancelled after 3 seasons? Because the outcry was louder than usual.
Yeah, I mean, it was so strange as well. I was in, I'd just been doing a fan convention, like literally just been doing a fan convention in Rome with some good friends of mine, and I was in a minibus on my way back to the hotel, and we were all about to go out for dinner. And we'd all had a really great day at the convention, and I'd been around Lucifer fans all day, and we'd been talking about the show, and you know, it very much felt like we were a show that was around for a while, and was going to be around for a while. And then I got a call from Joe, I think it was Joe Henderson, to say that he just found out that we'd been cancelled. And it was just like the energy in the minibus amount people knew what was going on, and it just like was sucked out. It was crazy. And everyone was shocked, shell shocked. I was with Richard Speight, who's one of our directors as well and works on Supernatural. And we were just like, we couldn't believe it. And I was gutted because I really enjoyed and have enjoyed doing the job. But I did have this kind of niggle that I thought, well, I don't think people are going to be very happy when they find out what I've just found out. I just don't think people are going to be happy. I didn't really figure um, how unhappy and how many people that would be, but it was mind blowing. I felt awful about the whole thing until it was announced that the show had been cancelled, and that was the moment I started to feel better, because my phone just blew up. It went absolutely crazy. I didn't stop going crazy for like days, and then
Wow.
I had a call from Warner Brothers saying that they were trying to they'd taken note of this outcry, and they were seeing if there was any way at all to find a new home for the show, but it was very, very unlikely. And I kept being told everything was very, very unlikely, very, very unlikely. and it never happens. It never happens. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to see what I can do. So I made my way to LA to kind of like help in that process. Whilst I was at Heathrow Airport, I got a call from, reached out from on Twitter from BBC Newsnight, which is like a very grown up after news service over here on BBC Two, where they discuss, you know, the day's news in very sort of cerebral detail. And they'd noted this whole thing about Save Lucifer, and they wanted to talk to me about it. And just the notion of how TV was changing and evolving and ratings and blah, blah, blah. So that became part of the conversation. It just kept snowballing and snowballing. And then it happened. And I have to say, it's amazing because we feel so vindicated now because the show has been so hit for Netflix. And Netflix had really cottoned on to this outcry that Lucifer had gone way beyond the Fox domain where we first started.
Yeah, it's like the biggest streaming show on the planet. Like I'm not being hyperbolic, that's a fact.
I know,
and
it's great, isn't it?
it's insane. And that must feel great that you guys are working your asses off and people love it and Netflix is behind it. It's a huge hit. And you're not even constrained by broadcast standards anymore. You can kind of be a bit ruder and more violent, if whatever you want. So, I mean, am I being hyperbolic? Is being on Netflix just really kind of the best thing for the show?
I mean, they've been amazing for us, and they were very, very hands off in terms of our creative process, and that felt like a big change, to be honest. There's a lot of micromanagement that goes on in TV, and to be left to your own devices is a real blessing. And I think because they knew that we knew the show really well, and we'd done 3 seasons of it, they were like, "We love what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing." Was basically our note from Netflix, and that meant that, you know, Joe and Ildi and our writers were able to take risks that maybe they felt they wouldn't have taken before because they wouldn't be allowed to, or anything like that, story wise. And you know, we haven't really changed the show an awful lot. But there is a kind of freedom to the show, I think, that's come with being on Netflix for sure. And the biggest difference for us, I think, is just that our audience gets it all at the same time. So whereas before we were on a network show and then it would be sort of drip fed amongst streamers throughout the world, and people were on different schedules, some were on season 2, some had only just got the first season. Now everyone's on the same season and it drops at the same time. It's like this sort of global juggernaut, and it's quite an overwhelming experience when the show drops, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the season finale ended with Lucifer, with everyone on bended knee, and Lucifer's, with the fiery sword saying, "Oh my me," which I thought was really kind of funny. Where are we headed for the final season? Are you in production yet? What's the story there? And can you just tell us every single thing about it, please?
Well, the final season is actually in the can. We're done.
It's in the can. Okay.
Yeah. So we basically, season 5B, the big delay on 5B was because obviously we had to stop for COVID during lockdown.
Yeah.
So we already knew we were going to do season 6 at that point. So when we came back, we had 2 weeks left on 5B, and then we went straight into shooting season 6.
Right.
So it is done. So I know how Lucifer finishes, and I'm excited for our audience. It was an interesting time because it was it was post COVID when we came back to do, or during COVID when we came back to do season 6. So there were some creative restrictions in place. But the good thing was that we found ourselves in a position with lots of characters that people knew. So we were less reliant on the bells and whistles maybe that sometimes we use on Lucifer, and season 6 becomes a bit more of a character study just because we were forced in that direction. But I think it's going to be great. I mean, the end of the show is something that we thought about for a long, long time. And I hope that our version of the end of what we think this story is something that everyone else likes. But I believe it to be everything we wanted it to be, which is bittersweet.
Yeah, it is bittersweet. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So are millions and millions of other people. So I look forward to speaking to you again in about a year's time, and you can look back on your Lucifer experience. In the meantime, Tom, congratulations on a great season 5, and good luck for your next project.
Thanks, Rob. Great talking to you, mate.
You too.
Take care.